Baggies fans, and welcome to the first video under the new channel name Harry's Baggies. And today we're going to be talking about the reaction to the official released and retained list from West Bromwich Albion for the end of the 25-26 season. And honestly, there are some emotional goodbyes in there, some expected exits, and a few interesting contract situations. And I think most importantly, it tells us a little bit where this club is going to be heading in the summer. Because when you look at the retained list, this isn't just your normal thank you and good boy type of announcement. This feels like a beginning of a genuine rebuild, a proper reset, new manager, younger profile, more energy, more sustainability financially, and probably a squad that's going to look very different by the time August comes around. So today we're going to break down every single major departure, talk about whether I agree with the decisions and what it means to the squad next year, and also discuss who I think Albion need to sign in the transfer window, and what positions really. And honestly, Baggies fans, I want to know your thoughts as well in the comments, because I think there's going to be a lot of split opinions on some of these names. Before we get started, make sure you smash that like button that's aiming for 20 likes in the video. Subscribe if you are new around here, and let's get stuck into the retained and release list. So first of all, and probably the biggest emotional one, is the departure of Jed Wallace. Now, I know for a lot of people, we signed him around the same sort of time as John Swift, and they were, big earners that really come in and didn't really live up to their full potential. But I do think that someone like Jed Wallace was just a massive figure around the Albion over the last few years, helped guide a lot of the younger players. And when he wasn't playing, he was still vocal. Okay, yes, some of the times he come out and made silly statements, like when Carlos Corberan left, he come out as joking, saying that, we can finally have ketchup again in the canteen. And when you're in a relegation battle and struggling, those are the sort of comments you don't really want to hear from your club captain. But then you could see when he was on the pitch, he always just give everything he possibly could. And I just think as a winger, the more older you get, and obviously the more pace you lose, and it just started to catch up with him, and he wasn't quick enough, and you could see we were struggling. And yeah, it was disappointing the way it did end for him. Obviously, he never really got back on the pitch after that injury. He made 150 appearances, scoring 16 goals, and got 16 assists during the time. And while statistically some fans may say that wasn't enough from an attacking player, I do think the numbers alone don't tell the full story of Wallace. You know, he did sometimes drag the team forward. I mean, look at the Wrexham game at the start of the season. 1-1, he come on, and within 16 seconds we scored to make it 2-1, and then a bit later we made it 3-1. So there were games where he could come on and make an impact change. I remember a couple of years ago going to Huddersfield away, and they were 2-0 up, and within the space of 2 minutes in the second half, he'd scored and got us back into the game. So he was an impact player, and he could have massive, massive impacts on us. But you could see just as he started to get on, it just didn't work out for him. And, leadership was, professionalism was. I do genuinely think he gave everything for the Albion. And obviously the club mentioned his off-the-work pitch with the PFA Community Award in 2024. It tells you the kind of character he was around the football club. Now, for me, Albion have to replace him directly. You can see that Morrison wants to play that 4-4-2 with quick wingers, so we need to do that. It's a departure that frees up a lot of wages, but we need to bring in a young, quick, skillful winger that's not afraid to beat his man and has got the legs to beat his man. And I really look forward to seeing what we do with that spare money. Don't get me wrong, Jed Wallace is going to be a miss as that impact player, but we need to spend the funds elsewhere and bring somebody in. I absolutely wish Jed Wallace the best wherever he goes next season, because I think he represented the shirt properly. And I do think realistically we'll probably be handing the captaincy to Malumbi on that aspect, because I do think he's a sort of character that Morrison wants as the new captain. Moving on to the next one, and for me, this one, Daryl Dike, it makes you sad more than anything, because when he first arrived at Albion, I think we all thought we'd absolutely sign a monster at this level. Physically unbelievable, quick, powerful, aggressive, the type of striker that defenders hated playing against, and the type of striker we'd been crying out for. And the cruel reality is injuries just completely destroyed what had been probably a great Albion career. He scored 11 goals in 68 appearances, but again, that doesn't really do it justice. This was a player that spent huge periods recovering, rebuilding, trying to get back fit, suffering setback after setback. And honestly, I respect the mentality he had to keep going through all of that. A lot of players would have mentally collapsed after repeat injuries, especially the one at Ipswich. You could see how much that one really, really broke him. But every time you saw Dike around the squad, he seemed positive, smiling, determined to come back. And the club specifically mentioned those late goals against Preston and Watford last season. Moments reminded us of what he could be, a powerful striker that, wasn't afraid to get his body stuck in. After all the injuries, he still got stuck in. But unfortunately, football can be ruthless. Albion looked at his wages, the injury history, and his uncertainty whether his body can consistently handle Championship football, and decided they couldn't make that risk moving forward. And for financially, I understand it. Emotionally, though, it's frustrating because there's still a part of me thinking, what if he'd stayed fit? What if we got a full season out of him? Because I do think he has a potential to be a top Championship striker, but he just can't stay fit. And I'd have probably even offered him like a 1-year extension on really cheap wages, and I think he'd have took it to give back to the club that have given him so much. I really hope wherever he goes, he manages to stay healthy, because there is a player there. I think he'll probably end up going back to the MLS and playing over there, in my opinion. And on to the final released, and it's Joe Wildsmith. And again, does anybody really care about this one? He was so poor at the Albion. Silly mistakes, getting beat from every which angle. The free kick goal against Derby in the cup. How did he concede from there? The goal against Swansea, where it just basically floated over his head. Him and David Button, for me, have got to be up there with the worst keepers I've seen in the Albion shirt. He went out on loan to Middlesbrough in the second half of the season, and yeah, I'm kind of glad we're getting rid of him again. Frees up wages, and it'd be nice if we could probably sniff at getting Alex Palmer back. Will that happen? I don't know. Obviously, it creates an interesting position because obviously Max O'Leary has been offered a contract as well, which we'll get onto in a bit. Obviously, we've got Wildsmith going, and Griffiths is still around as well. So do we bring in a third keeper like Palmer, and then what do we do? Do we push Griffiths on loan? Do we not sign O'Leary? So many things up in the air. But yeah, Wildsmith is leaving again. Yeah, didn't really much. The club didn't say much. We haven't got to say much. I think we're all in pretty much agreement that he's probably a poor keeper and a bit of a waste of funds, really. I think it's the right call. We needed to modernise the squad in several areas, and goalkeeper is just one of them. We need somebody reliably that's pushing our number 1 and number 2 keeper, and he just never did that. Obviously, we've got a couple of young players as well that haven't been given a contract. So Dan Chomsey, Mohamed Diamond, which I think that's a strange one because every time I saw him, he looked really good. Edwin Humphreys, Miller McDonald, Kevin Mufamba, Diago Nelson, Torrentine Engi, Dante German Ranger, Adam Okurundu, and Liam Wilkes are all departing. And whenever you see academy players released, it's a reminder how brutal football can be. Hundreds dream of making it professionally, and only a tiny percentage get there. Some of these lads will drop into an arm league, some might rebuild elsewhere, and some might completely surprise people later in their careers, and some might not even play football ever again. We've seen it happen before. We've seen Morgan Rogers leave our academy, go on to play for Middlesbrough, then Villa, Man City, and now, as I say, he's kicking it at Villa. Obviously, the lone players have returned as well. Charlie Taylor, not going to be a massive miss. Danny Imre could be a massive miss. Jamo Aloba, again, didn't really cut it for us, and Mustafa that we saw once in the cup. So, yeah, I think out of all those names, Danny Imre is the one that a lot of Albion fans hope we get back next season. Because obviously once he got comfortable in that right back position under Morrison, he showed so many good signs: energy, drive, fearlessness, looked like a modern fullback attacking at times. The problem with loans is you develop players at other clubs, and unless there's a buy option involved, then you are pretty much stuck. But I do hope we get him back. And I do think we're at a stage where we have to be smarter. We can't constantly rely on temporary solutions anymore. On to obviously the players that have been offered contracts. We've offered Grant a contract. I don't agree with that one, in my opinion. I understand that obviously if we release Grant and Madja, then obviously we need a massive rebuild because that just leaves Hegebo up front. But you could see both of those two just didn't really, they didn't want anything. Towards the end of the season, you could see that their names were elsewhere. Obviously, they've been reduced wages, been offered a reduced wage, but it's just, I don't know. It just doesn't, for me, shout and scream, positivity. Grant didn't look that good. Madja strolled around. We need to be bringing in players that want to play for the club, that want to run for the club. And those two players just didn't really seem to do it for me. And yeah, it just means that the summer for me has to be right now. It's okay having those two players possibly on the bench, but you have to be bringing in players that are pushing for the starting line and can push us up the table. And neither Madger and Grant really, in my opinion, can do that. Madger looked really slow. Some of the balls that was getting played through to him, and he looked like he was jogging. You know, once he come back from that big injury, he never really got back into the magic that we saw before. And Grant's the sort of player that will strop around for half an hour and then might try and take a man on or pass backwards or yeah. It's an interesting one. I want to see the thoughts and reasonings behind it from Morrison. Personally, I just think we can't throw away too many players because the rebuild will just be too big for us. But it's going to be a brutal season again next year. You know, clubs with parachute money, big spending clubs, massive fan bases, teams rebuilding. We cannot afford an average window. We need pace, creativity, a reliable striker, right back, possibly another centre back. But above all that, we need identity. You know, I want to know what this Albion team is going to be next season. Are we going to be in that 4-4-2 aggressive, you know, pressing? Are we going to be counter-attacking, physical, technical? Because in the last few years since Corbyn's gone, we've been stuck in multiple ideas. And it's a shame to see. And while I think some of the exits are sad, I do think we need a massive refresh. Football moves quickly, squads evolve, cycles end. Jed Wallace leaving feels like an end of one Albion era. Now let's see what comes next. I'm cautiously optimistic that the club can do the right thing in summer. I'm just a bit worried about the who's behind the recruitment drive. But they've got to deliver. It could define where we go for the next few years. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Who are you most sad to leave? Do you agree releasing Daryl, Dike and Jed Wallace? Which loan player would you like back? It's going to be Imre for all of us, isn't it? Most importantly, what positions do you have Albion to have to strengthen in this summer? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Come on, you Baggies.